kicking off the top 10, we have The Gorge. You have Scott Derrickson again in a movie that I can't tell if it's necessarily going to be a horror movie or like this weird action movie because you have two snipers on both on the sides of these gorge, basically there to protect whatever's inside the little gorge. We'll see. It looks great, and Scott Derrickson's a great director. You got Miles Teller in there, who is great. So, and you have the actress, that's a great actress. I don't know why I'm having a brain fart on her name all of a sudden. It looks like it's going to be an amazing movie. That's why it's on this list. It's on this list because of the trailer. That's why. We're going to move on. So now we are on to number 9, my 9th most anticipated horror film. And this is one that I think most people have at like number 1 or number 2, or at least in the top 3. I'm not a big zombie movie guy. I've never been into zombies. I can respect a lot of zombie movies, but outside of the zombie land, I've never been a huge fan of the genre. And that is 28 Days Later. 28 years later. The trailer is, once again, the only reason it's on here. Because I'm not a zombie guy, I haven't really checked out the first 2 movies. I will. I've heard great things about them. And when I hear great things about a zombie movie and I check it out, they tend to be right and be great movies. But at the same time, I'm not a zombie guy. I love Zombieland to death. But I also love that more as a comedy than I do a horror film. I'm also a big fan of this director, Danny Boyle. Trainspotting, one of the greatest movies ever made, in my opinion. So, I have faith that this will be one of the best horror movies of the year. Which is why it's on this list. But it's on the lower side of the top 10 just because I'm not a zombie guy. Moving on to 8, The Conjuring Last Rites. I'm not a big fan of outside of Annabelle Creation, I'm not a big fan of the spin-offs, but the main line of Conjuring movies, I do love. The first Conjuring from 2013, one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It's in like my top 5, top 10, probably top 5 maybe of horror of all time for me. It's definitely my favorite like ghost, demon, possession movie or whatever. Like paranormal, my favorite like paranormal horror movie. And while I do think the third one was kind of a drop-off, it's still within the Conjuring universe as a whole, it's still one of the best. And even though it was a drop-off from the first Conjuring and the Conjuring 2, it's still good enough that it ended up being pretty damn good. It's just not, on the greatness level as the other 2. I have not lost faith in it, so it's still here. I'm always going to anticipate a new Conjuring film, at least within the main line of Conjuring movies. I don't really care about The Nun or anything like that. Next up, we got Sinners. Ryan Coogler is an amazing director. I have my issues with Wakanda Forever. I still think it's a great movie. Black Panther's a great movie. Creed's a great movie. But I think the movie that nobody talks about is Fruitvale Station. Fruitvale Station is a movie. First, I think it's the greatest tearjerker. It's arguably the greatest tearjerker of all time, in my opinion. Or at least for me, it is. But it's not a horror movie. But you feel horrified when you're watching the scene in the train station, watching that movie. And so I think it's worth checking out for that reason, especially since he's making a horror movie. I don't think you're going to get the same sort of thing here, because it's a very different story. Extremely different story, but in terms of ramping up tension to make you feel a little horrified, and in that instance, it's like a real event. So, whereas this isn't. But he's a great director. He's a great director, and he works extremely well with Michael B. Jordan. And everyone's saying it's a vampire movie. Now we're getting into our top 6. Because this is kind of where these are truly my most anticipated movies. There's a drop-off here between 6 and 7. These are truly the 6 horror movies I am genuinely extremely excited for. At number 6, we have Heart Eyes. Like I said earlier, I love holiday slashers. And I'm a big fan of My Bloody Valentine from the original version. I have the steelbook with both the original theatrical cut and the unrated cut. I love and adore the original My Bloody Valentine. I think The Miner is one of the most underrated, like, I guess not necessarily underrated because everyone says it's a great design. I love the design, and I love everything about that movie. I can't believe we never got a franchise out of My Bloody Valentine. It was so primed for a franchise. The killer, like, even, like, survives and runs away. It was so perfectly set up for a franchise and a sequel and everything, and we never got it. And I have fun with the remake. It's okay. I think the remake's pretty good, but it's not the same to me. And I love Jensen Ackles, though. He's great. Everything I've seen from Hard Eyes, I actually avoided the most recent trailer. I don't need it. I'm sold on it already. I think it looks great. And I can't wait. Holiday slashers are back. Terrifier 3, Thanksgiving. They're back, baby. And I'm all here for it. I absolutely adore holiday slashers, baby. Oh, hopefully Hard Eyes does not disappoint. I don't think it will. It looks great. Give me that holiday schlock. And next, in the top 5, we got Saw 11. Now, the Saw franchise, I've always been up and down on. It took 10 movies to get the definitive best in the franchise, in my opinion. Personally. Maybe. We'll see how time plays out. But yeah, Saw, it's a franchise that I've always loved the concept better than the execution, which is why I've always been excited for Saw movies. But because the concept, I think, is amazing, but they always have issues in execution and pulling them off. Especially like when you get towards the middle era, where you're getting like Saw, the final chapter, where it's just kind of like they're focused on the wrong part of the idea and concept. This movie was supposed to come out, I believe, last year, and it got pushed back to this year. I'm very genuinely excited for it. So, moving on. Next, we have Final Destination Bloodlines. This could have been number 1. Like, originally when I set this list up, it was number 1. Final Destination was basically my introduction to horror movies. The first horror movie I technically saw, it wasn't necessarily the one I saw that made me into a huge horror fan, but it was technically the first horror movie I ever saw, and that was the Final Destination, the 4th one. Yeah, first horror movie I ever saw. Doesn't matter, though, because it made me a fan of the franchise, even if it didn't necessarily make me this big horror fan yet. That was still a little bit of ways. It made me a fan of the franchise, because when I did become a horror fan, I was like, ooh, I remember my sister showed me this movie that my parents got mad at her for showing me way back then, and like a couple years ago, and let me go check out the rest of those movies. And I realized that movie is significantly worse than all of the other ones. But I still have genuine love for that 4th one, and I love all of the Final Destination movies. I cannot wait for Bloodlines to come out. I do have some hesitations, though, because first of all, it's not a good sign nowadays to me when you go from a franchise that is always just 1, 2, 3, not 3, and then 5, 3, and then not 4, but 5. And then they take the number away and add a tagline. This doesn't feel like a good track. It's just something weird in my brain. I feel like if they just called it Final Destination 6, I'd have more faith in it, which is a weird thing because it's just a title. But we'll see how that goes. But the other reason is because directors are the people that made like a Leprechaun Origins, I think. It's a terrible Leprechaun movie. And they made a couple other like just terrible movies that have like 3 on IMDb. Like, they don't have a good track record, and that scares me. But it's still Final Destination. We're finally getting a new one, and that's why I'm excited for it and can't wait to go see it. And next we have Thanksgiving 2. I am an Eli Roth defender. I absolutely love Eli Roth. I will admit that sometimes his ideas and his like horror mind is better than his physical talent to make and execute the films. That being said, I think Hostel is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Thanksgiving is the best holiday slasher we've gotten probably this century. Halloween slashers are its own little thing. Halloween aside, it's definitely the best holiday slasher that we've gotten this century. And we're getting a sequel to it, made by the same guy. And I think the ending of the first Thanksgiving definitely leads itself to a sequel. And I think hopefully it'll be great. So, yeah, I can't wait for it. Because like I said, I love holiday slashers. Let's go. And kicking off into the top two, we have two films that are kind of within the same theme of each other. Now, number two is a movie that I'm going to see in like 2 days. Like I already got my tickets for it. And so it's right around the corner. And I'll probably actually see it. I've already seen it by the time this video is done editing this video. By the time I'm done editing this video, I will probably have already seen it. But I'm recording this a little bit ahead of time to give myself time to edit, because I have to work, for the next couple of days. So, we'll see. But that is Wolfman. Now, I'm not a big werewolf guy. If you had any other director attached to this, it would barely even make my honorable mentions. But I do like Universal Monsters. Like, I like the Universal Monster movies. It's just, I'm more of a Invisible Man, Dracula, Frankenstein kind of guy, more so than the Wolfman. But, that being said, The Invisible Man is one of the best horror movies still. Like, it was one of the first ones that came out this decade. But it's still one of the best horror movies of the decade, of the 2020s. It was my favorite movie, period, regardless of genre, in 2020. I absolutely adore the Invisible Man. And I think Leigh Whannell getting to do another original take on a Universal monster, I'm all here for it. That's all I need to hear. I don't care if if I'm not a werewolf person and it's a werewolf movie. And to be fair, by the way that they're describing it, it's more along the lines of The Fly than it is the original The Wolfman. But it's Leigh Whannell. Like I said, it's Leigh Whannell. That's why it's number two. But my most anticipated horror film of the year doesn't actually have a release date yet. It just simply says expected 2025. And that is another Universal Monster movie. Except I don't think it's through Universal necessarily. And that is Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. I think Guillermo del Toro is the perfect person to make a Frankenstein movie. And I think Frankenstein is the perfect movie for Guillermo del Toro to make. It's a marriage made in heaven that's just going to end up being this amazing gothic monster movie classic. Hopefully. The Netflix thing, it being a Netflix movie, that doesn't make me worried that it's going to be a bad movie. It makes me worried on the initial experience if I have to watch it sort of at home as opposed to in a theater. But the movie itself, I don't think is going to suffer because of that. And I'm still extremely looking forward to that.